Hello and welcome to MTG Burgeoning, a channel for all things magic. In this video, we are going to add the final 20 creature cards with mana values of 4 into our Momir Vig Cube. Greetings and salutations to the MTG BC. You are the MTG Burgeoning community. Welcome back to another installment of our soon-to-be-ending Momir Vig Cube Series. If you are unfamiliar with the goals or purpose of this series, or just need a refresher, you can search in the description below for a link to MTG Burgeoning's introduction to the Momir Vig Cube. And while you're down there in the description, you can also click the link to Cube Cobra, where you can see the entire contents of the cube as it stands right now. So here we go, the final 20 creature cards with mana values of 4 going into the cube, and we begin with a run of mono black creatures. The first is Unliving Psychopath, a 0/4 zombie assassin. We can pay a black mana to give it +1/-1 until end of turn. We can also pay a black mana and tap it to destroy target creature with power less than Unliving Psychopath's power. Again, we can only activate those abilities with black mana, so make sure you diversify your basic land library. Next up, we have Vengeful Reaper, a 2/3 Angel Cleric. It has flying, it has Death Touch, and it has haste. It also has Foretell, but that's meaningless in Momir Vig because every creature is summoned randomly from the Momir Vig Cube, and foretelling it is just not possible. Creature number 3 is a mono blue edition. It is Venser, Shaper Savant, a 2/2 human wizard. The flash here, similar to Foretell, is meaningless. When Venser enters the battlefield, we return target spell or permanent to its owner's hand. It will never be a spell because there's only one way to get creatures onto our side or our opponent's sides of the battlefield, and that's to use their avatar once per turn at sorcery speed. So for Venser, we're removing the flash, we're removing the spell, and when it ETBs, we return target permanent to its owner's hand. This could still be very, very useful because every creature summoned from the Momir Vig Cube is a token copy of the creature, and when a token leaves the battlefield, it ceases to exist. In this format, there are no instant or sorcery spells, so any kinds of removal that can get rid of creatures is highly coveted. Next up is a multicolored edition going back to the days of Tempest. It is Vat-Il Dal, a 3/3 legend that we could tap to have target creature's power or toughness become 1 until end of turn. Talk about your combat shenanigans. Next up, we have mono black again. It is Vindictive Vampire, a 2/3 vampire that whenever another creature we control dies, it will deal 1 damage to each opponent and we gain 1 life. This global life drain ability is very, very powerful in a format that's driven by combat and where each player only begins the game with 24 life. Our next creature is a mono green creature. It is a 5/3 elemental horse named Vinemare. It has hexproof, and it cannot be blocked by black creatures. Now again, every creature is summoned randomly through the cube, so whether or not our opponents have any black creatures, we won't know until we get Vinemare onto our side of the battlefield. Next up is our first mono white edition. It is Vitality Hunter, a 3/4 nightmare with lifelink, and it has the monstrosity mechanic. Here we can pay X and 2 white mana, and if this creature is not monstrous, we put X +1/+1 counters on it, and it becomes monstrous. When Vitality Hunter becomes monstrous, we put that's just 1 monstrous, it's not 2, it's just 1. We put a lifelink counter on each of up to X target creatures. So by giving as many creatures as we possibly can lifelink through the X cast of this activated ability, we can have the ability to gain more and more life while our opponent's life totals continuously tick southward. Again, however, we can only activate that ability if we have white mana to do so. Speaking of white mana, our next creature is mono white. It is Voice of All, a 2/2 angel with flying. When it comes into play, we choose a color, and it has protection from the chosen color. Evasion and flying is fabulous. Protection from a color is even better. It is even better in conjunction with the flying, not better standing alone. Well, although in some instances, it probably could be. All right, our next creature is our first colorless edition. It is Volatile Rig. It's a 4/4 construct with trample. It attacks each turn if able, so it's always attacking as long as it can, or as long as it's able. And whenever it does attack, let's read this again. Whenever a Volatile Rig is dealt damage, we flip a coin. If we lose the flip, we sacrifice Volatile Rig. And when Volatile Rig dies, we also flip a coin. If we lose that flip, it deals 4 damage to each creature and each player. So coming from the 4 spot, we have a reasonable chance. For me, it's probably a definite because of the coin flipping that's involved. There is a reasonable chance of wiping the entire board of all creatures with toughness 4 or less and then slinging 4 points of damage to each player. All right, reaching the halfway point of this video was another mono green edition. We have Waker of the Wilds, a 3/3 Merfolk Shaman, again with another X and 2 mana ability. This time it's 2 green mana. We pay this and put X+1/+1 counters on target land we control. That land becomes a 0/0 elemental creature with haste, and it's still a land. As we've highlighted multiple times throughout the cube, creatures that create creatures are very, very valuable. In most instances, those are creatures that create creature tokens. Here, however, Waker of the Wilds is turning our land base into creatures, and that's going to be very, very powerful as long as we have the green mana to do so. Next up, beginning the second half of our creatures here, is Wall of Reverence. It's a 1/6 with flying and defender, and at the beginning of our end step, we may gain life equal to the power of target creature we control. These peripheral life gain abilities could really help us out in the long game of Momir Vig. We're going back-to-back walls here. This time, it's Wall of Wonder, a 1/5 that we can pay 2 and 2 blue mana and give Wall of Wonder +4/-4 until end of turn, and it may attack this turn as though it weren't a wall. So either it's a 1/5 that's blocking, or maybe it's a 5/1 that's blocking, or maybe it's a 5/1 that's attacking. We can't switch that power and toughness unless we have those 2 blue mana to do so. Next up is a mono black edition. It's Waning Worm. It's a 7/6 zombie worm with Vanishing 2. This permanent will come into play with 2 time counters on it. At the beginning of our upkeep, we remove a time counter from Vanishing Worm, and when the last one is removed, we sacrifice it. It is a 3 and a black, so we are a 4 total mana for a 7/6. Those are good stats, but it's only going to last for a little bit of time, so let's make sure we send that bad boy into combat as much as possible. Our next creature is a colorless edition. It is Warden of Geometries. It's a 2/3 Eldrazi drone with vigilance that we can tap to add a colorless mana to our mana pool. This mana can help us accelerate creatures from the Momir Vig Cube and summon them to our side of the battlefield way ahead of curve. Reaching the 3/4 mark of this video, we're going another colorless edition. This time, it's Watchwing Scarecrow. It's a 2/4 Scarecrow. It has vigilance if we control a white creature, and it has flying if we control a blue creature. Now, of course, we have no idea which creatures we're getting because every creature is summoned randomly through the cube. So at its worst, it's a 2/4. At its best, it's a 2/4 with flying and vigilance. Creature number 16 is another mono blue edition. It is Water Servant, a 3/4 elemental. We can pay a blue mana to give it either +1/-1 or -1/+1. But without those islands, we can't activate those abilities at all. Our next creature is a mono white edition. It is Windborn Muse, a 2/3 spirit with flying. Love that evasion. And creatures cannot attack us unless their controller pays 2 for each creature attacking us. That could be attacks that may make our opponents think twice about sending their creatures in our direction, particularly if they're trying to keep up with the summoning creatures from the Momir Vig Cube arms race. All right, we're down to our final 3 creatures. We have a mono blue edition. It is Wing Splicer. It's a 1/1 human artificer that when it comes into play, we create a 3/3 colorless golem artifact creature token. So we're getting 2 bodies from 1 card. That's aces in our book, but even better than that, this human artificer gives golem creatures we control flying. So we get a 1/1 body that could just chump block if needed, and a 3/3 golem that is going to fly as long as Wing Splicer is on our side of the battlefield. Next up, in what could be the most powerful 4-drop in the entire cube, we have World Shaper. It's a 3/3 Merfolk Shaman. Whenever it attacks, we may put the top 3 cards of our library into our graveyard. When World Shaper dies, we put all land cards from our graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. Keep in mind that each time we activate our Simic Visionary avatar, we must discard a card in order to summon a creature from the Momir Vig Cube. Those cards that are being discarded are lands. Remember, our basic libraries are filled with just lands. So our graveyard is accumulating with lands that we've discarded, and then World Shaper puts 3 more into our graveyard whenever it attacks, and whenever it dies, every single one of those lands is coming onto the battlefield under our control, which should easily allow us to funnel in mana to the 8 tier and end up winning the game shortly thereafter. All right, folks, here it is. Creature number 20 overall in this video and number 200 in the 4-drop. We close out 4 tier with Yawgmoth Thran Physician. It's a 2/4 human cleric with protection from humans. We can pay 1 life, sacrifice another creature, and put a -1/-1 counter on up to 1 target creature, and we draw a card. We can also pay 2 black mana and discard a card to proliferate. So Yawgmoth offers an awful lot of abilities on 1 body. The protection with humans, I mean, that could be good. There are some humans in the cube, but being able to remove creatures with -1/-1 counters, we have to sacrifice other creatures and pay life to do so, but we are drawing cards, and we can discard to proliferate. Again, we can't discard to proliferate without using those 2 black mana, so make sure you diversify your basic land libraries. And there we have it, MTG BC. The final 20 creature cards with mana values of 4 are now in the cube. That brings us to 200. Let me know in the comment section below, which are your favorites. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things Magic.